Hello and welcome to another episode of the Morning Bulletin from Blood Red. We're back. I'm James Martin. Today I'm joined by Andrew Beasley, and the topic on the agenda is who is the best player attacker in the world. We'll cover both. There's been a little bit of ambiguity about exactly what the question is. Are they the same question? We'll cover all of that over the next 10 minutes or so. So we'll start with the kind of narrower question, Andrew. Best attacker in the world. There's a few candidates, and Karim Benzema made his case a bit more last night, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a hat trick to see Real Madrid through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League is not bad going. I saw he's the oldest player to score a Champions League hat trick. So yeah, he was very impressive last night. You always have to wonder that sort of thing. Was he particularly good? Were PSG their usual sort of flaky selves? I mean, probably a little bit of both as always. But yeah, it's been great to see how he has, how he's done sort of since Ronaldo's left, sort of come out of the shadow of him a little bit. And yeah, obviously fantastic player, certainly.
So you mentioned Ronaldo there. You also mentioned old players scoring Champions League hat tricks, so that brings Lewandowski into the mix as well. Obviously, Messi still kicking about. Beyond them, it's probably Mbappe, Salah. Is there anyone else in the conversation, or would you say those are the kind of top five attackers right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Erling Haaland would probably want a word in the conversation, possibly, but he may sort of reach the absolute top level in another sort of year or two, what have you. Yeah, I mean, Lewandowski, yeah, just keeps scoring. Obviously, I mean, 2 were penalties the other night, but just relentless sort of goal machine. It would be interesting to see what happened if he came to the Premier League, as has been rumoured, because a lot of people think there's a sort of Bundesliga tax whereby you come over here and it's harder to do as well. But yeah, I mean, you could name any of those sort of players as the best attacker in the world right now, the ones we mentioned, and you obviously wouldn't get agreement on it, but I think you could make a case for any of them, certainly.
But it's an interesting one. You make a good point there, sort of indirectly, in the sense that there aren't that many players in the conversation who are actually in their prime. You've got Ronaldo and Messi, and to some extent Lewandowski and Benzema, who are either slightly past their peak or at least approaching that point. I mean, Benzema and Lewandowski doing their best to disprove that week on week, but they're coming to an age at any rate that they're almost of the last generation of great attackers. Then you've got Mbappe, as you say, Haaland, who are still coming through. They're very good, obviously, already, but you'd think in the next 4 or 5 years they'll just get better. Does that somewhat clear the way for Salah as the one who's sort of really in his prime right now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because for so long people have sort of thought that a player's prime was maybe sort of 27, 28, and you get into your 30s and you're sort of not finished, but you're obviously on the downward slope. But I mean, obviously these guys we've mentioned, the older guys, are still proving that it is possible to play at the very elite level in your mid-30s. So yeah, I mean, there probably aren't many who are in that traditional bracket of sort of 27 to 30 that we used to think of as being a sort of player's peak years, and obviously Salah is probably top among those who are in that bracket. So yeah, I think well, I'm going to be sort of writing something about it today, but I think the performance of the older guys shows that there's no reason to think that Salah's going to sort of fall off a cliff anytime soon, because other players are showing that it's possible to perform well when you're still 33, 34. But yeah, I mean, he's probably the top man in that what we would consider sort of peak age bracket. Yeah,
it's a much more complex question than it used to be. It used to just be, are you a Messi man or a Ronaldo person? But that's all changed now. But they're both still playing, so I feel justified in still putting it to you, Messi or Ronaldo.
Oh, it's Messi. It's always been Messi. Well, I suppose it depends. As you mentioned earlier, you talk about best attacker, best player. If you wanted an absolute just goal scorer, then you'd probably take Ronaldo of the two. Certainly years ago, more so than perhaps now. But I mean, yeah, best player is Messi of the two, unquestionably.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm just here to ask the questions today, but I have to state my full agreement on that point. Yeah, it's, as you say, it's always been Messi. But like we touched on there, it is just attackers we've been talking about. There is a question of, if you widen it out to all players, of course, you run into major problems in comparing like for like. When you're looking at centre back against the centre forward. But would you say there are other players that come into the conversation when you broaden it out?
Well, there should be, but I think it is always that thing of like when the best player in the world is discussed, and it always has been. It's always going to be an attacker who probably gets the nod. I mean, before his sort of injury, could you make a claim for Virgil van Dijk? I mean, possibly you could. Certainly in terms of the impact he had upon Liverpool and how they instantly became so much of a better team when he signed. I mean, similarly, I don't think a goalkeeper would ever be claimed to be the absolute best player in the world, but I think in Alisson Becker, Liverpool have probably got the best goalkeeper in the world as well. Aside from them, I thought it was interesting. I think a few people were surprised when Luka Modric won the Ballon d'Or a few years ago, and I'm not sure anyone would claim he was the best player in the world or anything, but he's another one who's still going. He's getting on a little bit, still going well, played well last night. So as much as there are players in different positions who can make strong cases, whenever the debate comes up, it's always going to be an attacker, I think, who's deemed the best player in the world. It's just the way it goes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Modric is 36 now, I think, and still going remarkably strong. But yeah, I think the last defender to win the Ballon d'Or would be Fabio Cannavaro. So it takes a little while before these players come on the agenda. If they're not banging in goals, then they're not really going to be talked about. But yeah, we were mentioning it on another podcast a few days ago, actually, how obviously Liverpool had to go without Salah for a few games over the African Cup of Nations. They weren't the hardest games in the world, but still the team were picking up the results. They were still looking very good. Whereas obviously a longer sample size, but last season when you lost Van Dijk, of course, lost other players as well. It wasn't just Van Dijk, but that kind of had a much more destabilizing effect on the team. And you think, well, if you have to say which one of them is more irreplaceable, maybe you would say Van Dijk.
Yeah, I think there's a case for that. Of course, last season, we didn't want him to get injured, obviously, but it would have been interesting if he'd have been the only centre-back to get injured to see how Liverpool would have coped without him, because they were doing okay when they still had Gomez and Matip at the start of last season. It's only when everybody went down that things started to sort of unravel. But yeah, it's an interesting thing about making the case that he's more indispensable than Salah. If Salah's missing, there's still Mane and Jota and now Diaz and Firmino and stuff like this. But do we have anyone who quite matches up to Van Dijk at the back? Possibly not. So you could make a case on that, certainly. Yeah.
I hear exactly what you're saying. You're saying Matip is the true best player in the world, because when he got the injury, that's when it all fell apart.
Sure, I know you're a Matip ultra, James, so I'll just agree with you. Yeah.
No, we had a comment there about Benzema, that he's definitely the one where the conversation is at the moment. Obviously, there's a lot of that is just because he was the one who did so well last night. But there is an interesting point. We talked about how attackers get all the praise largely because they're racking up the goal numbers. Of course, Benzema has exceptional goal numbers, but traditionally he has been more of that kind of selfless forward, and not necessarily in the Roberto Firmino mold, but that sort of ethos of bringing others into play as much as scoring goals himself. Do you think those kind of players are still underappreciated for that very reason?
Yeah, they probably always will be. I think, you look at someone like Firmino and Liverpool fans will defend him to the ends of the earth, and fans of other clubs who don't watch Liverpool all the time probably like, oh, what does he do? Oh, he's only got 7 goals or whatever it is, that sort of thing. I think such players always will be slightly underappreciated, even though, a bit of a cliche first name on the team sheet, but, the managers certainly appreciate what they bring to the team, and the fans who watch them every week do as well. But that there will, as much as analysis of football and things evolves and improves, a lot of it will still come down to, how many goals has he got, particularly when you're a forward, how many assists maybe, but that sort of general work that doesn't directly contribute. I mean, how many goals have Mane and Salah scored thanks to the space that Firmino has created for them? But there's no stat for that, as people like to say. So maybe there should be. But yeah, those players will always be, I think, loved by their own manager and their fans. But hard to get the appreciation of people who don't watch them every week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So there we have it. We've solved precisely nothing. The best player in the world is, as ever, an unanswerable debate. But there's still plenty of people who want to give their answers. We'd love to hear yours. Just drop us a comment, and maybe we'll pick it up in a future video. But for now, that'll do us in the morning bulletin. Thank you very much for listening. We'll be back again every weekday, except on match days. You can catch all of our other content on Liverpool.com and on the Blood Red YouTube channel. Thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.